Hey, welcome back. Chuck here from Amish, PA. I'd like to thank our sponsor of today's video, Camel City Mill. Camel City Mill, an American manufacturer of quality wool work socks, reached out to me a while back and offered me a couple pair of their socks in exchange for an honest review. I put the socks through the ringer, so to speak, and was thoroughly impressed. If you're looking for high-quality wool work socks that wrap your feet in cushiony softness, that have a reinforced toe and heel area, that keep your feet dry even on the hottest days, and come with a 10-year guarantee, look no further than the American-made quality from Camel City Mill. I left a link in the description to my review video and also a link right directly to the company. Use the link and get 10% off your order. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. These are really nice socks. "18 miles long and 3 miles wide at the widest point, Brush Valley in Center County, Pennsylvania, has been home to Old Order Amish since the first family settled there in 1967, making the move from their homes in Lancaster County. They found land that could be purchased for less than $200 per acre. What they also found was relief from the strife and the rapid growth of the county they left. The valley was originally purchased for the princely sum of $24 by Samuel Mills, who acquired it from William Penn's son John in 1792. Mills then leased it to pioneers of Scotch, Irish, and English descent in 300-acre tracts. Originally called Sinking Spring Valley because Elk Creek disappeared and reappeared as it ran down the valley, today it is known as Brush Valley. The early settlers grew grains like rye and wheat and fruits like apples and peaches. Soon they had enough and they could sell the surplus to the east. But it had to be shipped over rough and rocky roads. Due to this difficulty of shipping, the crops were distilled into whiskey. At one time, 9 distilleries were active in the valley. Some of the best rye whiskey, applejack, and peach brandy in the east was created right there in the valley. Elk Creek was named for the many hundreds of elk that frequented the creek during their yearly shed. It is said there were so many shed antlers that early pioneers interlocked them to cattle-proof their gardens. Route 192 runs east-west down the center of the valley. Rebersburg, centrally located, is the largest town in the valley. The video you are watching was shot east to west in the morning with the sun behind, and then west to east in the afternoon. The Amish that settled in the valley did so for a couple of different reasons. There was unrest in a few of the Lancaster church districts. This usually means there was some type of disagreement over church rules. Rather than causing a widespread split, the disaffected people generally move on to keep the church in harmony. The second reason were land prices. Land was just becoming too difficult to find and too expensive to buy. In 1967, 7 families left their homes and their families to settle in this new area. The valley seemed very peaceful compared to where they were leaving. First, one family moved and were soon followed by the others. Home remodeling, barn building, and working their newly purchased land occupied their time. 29 Amish met at Jacob Stoltz's on Sunday, March 12, 1967, for the very first Amish church service in the valley. The first baby was also born in that year. on June 6th. What follows are some interesting diary entries up to 1979 when the history was written. The history I'll be referring to is called the History and Directory of the Old Order Amish of Brush, Nittany, and Sugar Valleys in Center and Clinton Counties, Pennsylvania, 1979. The Amish were blessed in 1967. It was an exceptionally good year for crops. Garden yields were plentiful also. In early 1968, a family from Juniata County moved in, and they built a harness and shoe shop, two necessities for any Amish settlement. In August of that year, we read that Abner King, during haying, had one of his fingers smashed by a wagon bed. Injuries seem very common during this period. During the winter of 68-69, a dairy barn raising was held at the Chris Stoltzfus farm with help from friends and family from Lancaster County. The first death, unfortunately, was a little baby boy who died June 1969 at 8 hours old. This necessitated the first cemetery being created. Today, it's known as Elk Creek Cemetery. In the fall of 1969, we read that Daniel Stoltzfus broke his right arm during corn harvest when he slipped onto the power takeoff shaft. Henry Stoltzfus sprained his wrist also that fall when he was kicked by a tractor. The first bench wagon, or church wagon, was built by church members in the fall of 1969 also. The winter of 69-70 was cold and snowy. Snow covered the ground from the middle of December until spring rolled around in 1970. In June of 1970, the annual statewide Amish school directors meeting was held in the valley at Jacob Stoltzfus's home. 400 people attended. Earlier that same year, in February, the John Fisher home was severely damaged by a fire caused by an overheated stove. Fire seemed to be a common occurrence in the valley. In December of 1970, damage was done to some outbuildings on the Tobias Stoltzfus farm. Lard cooked over while potato chips were being made. Amos Byler, a young boy, fell down the straw hole in a barn and was taken to the hospital. He suffered fractures and a concussion. The small community grew in 1971. 5 more families moved into the valley, increasing the count to 29. The population increased to 179 total Amish. A blizzard hit the valley in February of 1972 over a weekend, and church was canceled. After the blizzard, 2 boys were injured in a sledding accident while at school. They crashed into a board fence, resulting in stitches and bruises. 1972 didn't get much better. In the latter part of June, it began raining, and it wouldn't stop until 11.7 inches of rain fell on the valley. This was Hurricane Agnes. Elk Creek seemed like a mighty river. Bridges were washed away, some roads were impassable, and cellars and first floors flooded. At the Jacob Stoltzfus farm, water ran through the cow stable. Milking had to be done in ankle-deep water. On November 14th of that year, 1972, the first Amish wedding occurred in the valley. Emma Stoltzfus wedded David Stoltzfus of Leola, Pennsylvania. A long-standing Amish tradition, started in Lancaster County, occurred for the first time in Brush Valley in February of 1973. That's when the first consignment sale was held. The consignment sale has occurred annually since that first one. In May of '73, Henry Byler, gravely ill with spinal meningitis, was admitted to the hospital. In August the same year, a young girl climbed 30 feet up a silo and fell, hitting her head on a stone. At Geisinger Medical Center in Danville, a part of her brain and part of her skull bone had to be removed. 6 years later, at the time of this writing, the only ill effects noticeable was a slight limp. Gypsy moths wreaked havoc on the mountains in June of '74. Leaves were devoured, leaving large bare spots on the mountain slopes. In the fall of '74, church was divided. The valley was now home to 2 church districts. This not only made the number of church attendees more manageable to the host, but also cut down on travel time and distance. In the fall of 1975, Reuben Fisher was shot during a snow squall while he was grabbing the wash line. The line was plastic-coated cable with aluminum pulleys at both ends. They never figured out what shocked him. Tragedy struck once again one morning in April of 1975 when flames engulfed the entire roof of the farm home of Daniel Stoltzfus. Sparks from the stove ignited the cedar shingle roof. The house was cleared of belongings by several hundred neighbors before damage could be done to the family's possessions. By the time the fire was extinguished, it had destroyed the attic in the upper story of the home. By late afternoon that same day, a new attic floor was in place and the entirety covered in plastic, sealing out the weather. The next day, the roof was put back on. It's noted that canning lids were scarce in 1975. In January of 1976, Elk Creek School closed for 3 days as measles fell upon the scholars. In March, the teacher at Elk Creek School, Elmer Stoltzfus, fractured his skull and some ribs when he was thrown from his horse. In the summer of that year, the first large chicken house was built in the valley on the Chris Stoltzfus farm. A youngster during the summer, Jonathan King, fell 10 feet from the granary, breaking 4 bones around his eye. The winter of 76-77 was cold and windy. Winds averaged 15 to 40 miles per hour. Wind chills hit 50 to 69 below zero. Many diesel lines froze that winter. Schools closed for 3 days by order of Governor Schaap to save energy. In May of 1977, Enos King was kicked by his mule. The mule had been down and unable to get up in the barn. Enos helped him up, slapped him on the butt to get him back in the stable, and the mule kicked him right in the chest. Later that day, the mule died. The gypsy moths returned in the summer of 1977, worse than they did previously. Shade trees and fruit trees were threatened. The bare mountainsides made it look more like winter rather than summer. As winter approached, in November, Levi Byler went to light the bake shop oven when an explosion threw him back 8 feet and burned off his eyelids and part of his beard. In January of 1978, 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl, were hurt when their pony cart was struck by a car. The little boy was treated for shock. The little girl broke her leg, and she was put in a cast for 4 months. Later that same month, Amish Stoltzfus hit a pole while sledding and had to have his spleen removed. In March of 78, straw hats began to be sold in the valley. The Miller girls from Lancaster County sent them up to the Ben Laps to be sold at his place. In June, John Lapp fell from the haymow while playing bag tag with friends. Both his arms were broken, and both had to be put into casts. In July, David Stoltzfus broke his collarbone after falling off his mule. The mule shied from a zucchini plant, throwing him into a watermelon plant. One of the last entries in the history tells of the December 19th, 1978 Tuesday fire at the Melvin Stoltzfus home, which caused extensive damage. By Saturday evening, volunteers had helped rebuild the chimney, replaced the siding on one side of the house, repaired the kitchen ceiling, put in new ceilings upstairs, paneled the upstairs, and completed many other tasks. The work was completed the day before Christmas Eve. The Amish have a deep and long-lasting tradition of coming together to help those in need. Today, Brush Valley is still the same quiet valley that the first Amish saw when they settled there more than 50 years ago. Land prices have increased dramatically. Dairy farms are few and far between, but the Amish keep thriving. Today's population exceeds 1,000, and the original church district has grown to 8 church districts. While tourists visit the valley today, it is not for the touristy shops and eateries found in other Amish areas. The area abounds in natural beauty, small roadside stands, farms dotting the landscape, and Amish-run businesses like sawmills and pallet factories. Take a ride down Route 192 and enjoy the peace and quiet yourself. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. It was a great joy making it, and I hope you enjoy it also. I've got to jump in here and tell you about Mammy's Donut Shop. Mammy's Donut Shop is found at 163 Smolten Road in Rebersburg. It's off Route 192. You've got to stop there if you travel down the valley. These donuts are out of this world. Stepping in the shop, you'd swear you're stepping back in time 50 years. And look at all these goodies.